Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grimflayer, and I hope you are all doing very well today. We're back with yet more competitive league action for you with everybody's favorite deck, BG the Rock, Golgari Midrange, whatever you want to call it. We're playing it here, and I'm showing you my May list with one exception. It is the same change that I made in my previous league, which is with the rise of specifically the Neoform Grishoalbrand combo, which seems to be everywhere online, and also with just the general calls for it in the meta, I've brought back my Grafdigger's Cage, which initially I had cut for this month to make way for Ashiok for testing. Decided I needed the cage, but didn't want to cut Ashiok because, A, Ashiok seems pretty good against a lot of the same stuff, which is pretty necessary in the meta, and B, I want to test Ashiok. So I have cut my beloved second Maelstrom Pulse, at least for now, just to fit these extra hate cards in my sideboard. Otherwise, we're looking at the same list we've been playing with this entire month of May. And we're going to get right into the competitive league replay, doing the replays today. I think we've hit on a pretty decent formula for this channel where we do the majority of the gameplay content live recorded, but we mix in the replays as kind of a maybe every third or every fourth video will be a replay. I know a lot of people do like the replays, and also sometimes it fits better with my own schedule. As a working father, sometimes the replays are a better fit. So, having said that, let us thank our brand new Patreon supporter, who goes by the name of Gay69LOL. So, Gay69LOL, who probably just chose that name to hear me read it out loud, is a confidant. So, thank you, my friend, for that level of support. I do appreciate it, and to all Patreon supporters, thank you so much. Remember, my friends, if you're liking this content, you can check out my Patreon page, visit check out the tier rewards, and remember to also like, share, comment, and subscribe. Without further ado, let's play some Green Black Rock in Modern. Alright, my friends, here we are for round one, and our hand is lacking in interaction. It's only got Trophy. Trophy is arguably our worst interaction on average early game. However, we don't know what we're up against. It's a functional hand. We are on the draw, so we're going to see more cards, so I do believe this is a keep, but it is certainly not the best I've seen. The opponent goes turn one City of Brass Pass, so my first thought was Ad Nauseam. Love this art on City of Brass, by the way. That's the only way to play the card. We draw Dark Confidant, which contributes to our problem of too many threats, but at least can find us more interaction. So we play Hissing Quagmire, we pass, and the opponent plays Gemstone Caverns, which is not known Ad Nauseam tech, at least not to me. And then they go Monomorphose, so now I know we're in for something different, and here we go. So the opponent's making green-blue, and I'm just going to hit play here. They play an Allosaurus Rider, and this is Neoform Grishoalbrand, so here they go, seeing a good half of their deck. They cast Nourishing Shoal to gain more life to activate Grishoalbrand more. They eventually find Samet Sprint, pay for it with Simian Spirit Guide, which gives +2/+1, and haste, and scries 1, so they hit us for 10 lifelink, and then they get to see even more of their deck. They draw 7 more. They draw 7 more. They're exiling Simian Guides. They play another Allosaurus Rider, exiling a pair of Wild Canter. They play another Monomorphose. They Neoform targeting Allosaurus Rider, so of course this is the new tech that makes this version of the Grishoalbrand deck work, and it tutors up a creature card with CMC equal to 1 plus the sacrifice creature's mana cost. The opponent didn't have anything to get, so they failed to find. They draw 7. They play another Allosaurus Rider. And the replay catches up with us. I think they might have activated once more, maybe not. In either case, they simply scooped it up here. So I have to imagine that this was some kind of horrible punt, or maybe extreme lack of luck on the part of the opponent. I simply don't know. Regardless, we did get the we did get to see the deck go off a little bit, and if anybody's a little bit more in tune with the exact lines of the deck, this is my first time ever playing against it. You can maybe let me know what happens. But yeah, I think they might have drawn another 7 here and then scooped it up. Now, note that Neoform, Grishoalbrand stays on the field. We had the answer in the form of Trophy, but, them scooping there definitely surprised me. Regardless, that's what happened. They scooped, and then, spoiler alert, they disconnected during sideboarding. So I don't know if that was a shame disconnect or if that was a genuine connectivity issue. Regardless, the opponent definitely executed the combo. They didn't disconnect during the combo, and either it fizzled or they were maybe new to the deck and they didn't quite make it happen. So a bit of an anticlimactic round 1, but we start off with a win, and I'm also going to show you how I was sideboarding against it, and how I did sideboard before my opponent failed to reconnect. Alright, my friends, so against Neoform Grishoalbrand, I am soliciting feedback here because I've still never really played the deck. Like, I cast Hissing Quagmire, the opponent did a bunch of stuff, and then they scooped. So, people say Hissing Quagmire is not a good enough manland. Well, that's the only card I played, and I won the match. So, what do you say about that? But, regardless, I am soliciting feedback here because this is all just based on me glancing at a couple lists. But Grafdigger's Cage and Ashiok both to shut down the search. Surgical Extraction, because it is a combo deck that seems pretty fragile to most forms of disruption. Extraction, is definitely... They might not be putting the Grishoalbrand in the graveyard like other Grishoalbrand decks do, but we can still get a lot of mileage out of Extraction. Just generally the low, zero-cost interaction in this case seems good. Collective Brutality, more hand disruption, and then an Edict effect in Liliana's Triumph with upside. Seems pretty decent to me, so I think... again, with no experience in the matchup, I think I would bring in those 6, and I think we have 6 pretty free cuts of Fatal Push ×4, Abrupt Decay, and Liliana the Last Hope. Now, there may be some pieces of sideboard tech that might be reasons to keep in some of these things, so I could see an argument for maybe cutting, like, a copy of Tracker instead of maybe Abrupt Decay. Like, if we want to have an out to Chalice of the Void, if they bring that in. But if you don't know what they're playing in the sideboard, I think siding 6 for 6 like that is fine. They also don't seem very graveyard dependent at all, but I have seen Noxious Revival in lists, just again glancing quickly, so Nihil Spellbomb would be an option, but I would probably just side 6 in, 6 out, just like that, staying really proactive with a high threat density, until I see more of the opposition tech, and then maybe consider again bringing back Decay to answer certain sideboard pieces they have, maybe playing Nihil Spellbomb, who knows. But, as always, my friends, let me know what you would do. I would love to hear it, and let's move on to round 2. Round 2, my friends, we are on the draw, and our hand is fine. We've got Inquisition and Collective Brutality, which are good forms of interaction in a blind game 1, and they are especially good against the Celestial Colonnade deck that we're facing, so... Let's lead off on that Inquisition, and we see Steam Vents indicating Jeskai Control. Not the most common anymore. Blue-white is still king, and Esper is more trendy than Jeskai right now, so far as 3-color decks go. But we see a hand that's pretty stacked with value. They've got enough mana to do everything, kind of, but it's all a little clunky. That said, this is a long game, so the hand is very value-dense. So... Vendilion Click is kind of the least redundant piece of their hand, so it's worth considering taking that, but at the end of the day, I don't think that's worth it. I don't think the Click is that big a deal, and I want to just take the 2-for-1, so I take away Snapcaster Mage. Opponent plays a Scalding Tarn and passes back. We've drawn a couple straight Tarmogoyfs for turn, and we're pretty happy to play one here. Obviously, they can path it, and we could have really carefully played around that, made sure we played around it with that Collective Brutality instead, but I don't mind getting my first Tarmogoyf pathed. This early in the game doesn't bother me much. Land is not a very exciting draw here, but let's attack with a Goyf, see what happens. Alright, opponent's got nothing. So at this point, I think we're just deploying Goyfs. We're embracing the role of the aggro, the presence of Hissing Quagmire, and especially Treetop Village, definitely lends itself to that, and Kalitas to follow up. So Collective Brutality, we're going to wait for this Vendilion click, so maybe we can use Brutality as a kill spell if we keep it around, but we don't, they take it away. So sure. The fact that we drew a Swamp to replace it is a little rough. We're pretty flooded. But the opponent's going on the aggro, makes sense they don't have a good block here, and we draw yet another land. But, hey, you know, at least it is another man land. So I chose to fire up the Treetop Village here for a couple reasons. Number one, you know, we still know they have Path to Exile, so it's not like Kalitas is any kind of an unbeatable bomb when they're sitting on a path. Number two, you know, often if they have like Lightning Bolt or Lightning Helix to point at a land, that's pretty bad. We want to wait for a window where they're tapped out or where we know they don't have it. In this case, I have so many lands in general and so many man lands in particular that I think it's okay. So I judged it was better to try to get as much damage across as possible right now, and that also allows me to play another man land in the second main phase, which is also nice. And they do indeed have Helix, so that's pretty much one of the best cards they could have in this situation. It, of course, gains them a little life and all that, in addition to answering the Treetop Village. But note that they're still facing lethal on board. You know, we've got a pair of 4/5 Goyfs and a Quagmire. Again, they still have that path, but they're stuck on 3 lands, notably. We draw Thoughtseize. Now, I would have been pretty happy, for the same reasons I attacked with Treetop last turn, to just fire up the Quagmire and make them path something here. But I think Thoughtseize is a strong enough draw that we just open on that. And they will indeed path a Goyf in response. Sure, that's expected. And then we see a very powerful, but admittedly clunky hand. So, double Cryptic Command and a Snapcaster Mage and Dovin's Veto. Dovin's Veto is the only card we definitely don't care about. So I chose to take the Snap. It takes Snap Path off the table, of course, and forces them to draw a land or almost certainly die next turn. And they draw a land. They draw a really good land to Field of Ruin, so fair enough. And the Vendilion click clock is pretty real at this point, so back to us. We draw a field of our own. Okay, you know, again, drawing lands is not where we want to be. But let's attack with the Goyf. I think this is really nice here, because attacking with a Quagmire gives them the very obvious line of Cryptic to tap your team down and draw a card. Then they can start chaining Cryptics together, and it could get out of hand. So I think attacking with exactly one Goyf, it makes them really think about it. It puts them... Now, anything connecting is lethal, including Collective Brutality. You know, obviously a Hissing Quagmire, things like this. So, Field of Ruin is our follow-up play. And I'm pretty happy to hit the Colonnade, because this may take them off of either triple blue or white. And it looks like it's taking them off of white. So now I'm pretty happy to just jam the Kalitas into this known Cryptic Command. So why am I doing that? Because if I don't, they're just going to end step, bounce the Tarmogoyf, and draw a card. I don't really want them to draw a card. Kalitas is obviously decent in this situation, but I think I'd rather just kind of force them to counter the Kalitas, and then they also choose to bounce the Tarmogoyf, so they kind of got to do both, but they're not drawing a card, so I'm pretty happy with that, all things considered. That was one of a couple acceptable results for me playing that Kalitas. So the opponent's sitting on Cryptic, an uncastable Veto, and one unknown. We draw Assassin's Trophy, so that's a pretty interesting draw. I'm going to begin by attacking with a Hissing Quagmire. This is just presenting lethal, and if they have to like bounce it and draw, then that's not the end of the world, or of course Field of Ruin as well. So we'll activate Trophy away that click. Pretty bad under a lot of circumstances, but they're already going to fix their mana with Field, so we're pretty happy to do this. And either way, we force them to take action that takes them off of Cryptic Command mana this turn, so we're potentially free to redeploy this Tarmogoyf. But the opponent has a response, and it's a Logic Knot for 2, so, you know, that was one of the few cards that could really answer our Goyf, so things are getting really interesting. We're at 6. We're in double Burn spell range. They have Cryptic Command, and we top deck a land, so that's pretty bad. All we can really do is attack with this Hissing Quagmire and see what they've got. Hopefully not a burn spell. Okay, it's a cryptic command to bounce and draw. Again, I really don't mind that, and of course I just replay that for turn. If you think that's a very important sequencing note, if you think it is likely that the opponent's going to bounce a man land at any point, you should obviously hold your land drop in anticipation of that. So we replay it. Fatal Push, so our draws have been pretty bad, and because they've got Field of Ruin open, I'm just not even attacking. And the opponent chooses not to activate, so that's fine. They play a Colonnade, okay, they're potentially stabilizing, and we draw yet another bad card, Maelstrom Pulse. Not bad in the matchup, necessarily, but definitely bad in this situation. I played out my Marsh Flats there because we've got another land to sandbag for the usual reasons, and I might be incentivized to thin out my deck at some point. The opponent's got another land as well. We draw Collective Brutality, so that is very interesting. However, we know they have Dovin's Veto. We know it's not just going to resolve if we jam it, so we just pass, trying to really bide our time, pick our spot, wait for the right window. But the longer the game goes on, the more they can just draw Burn Spell, Double Burn Spell, or Burn Snap Burn to finish us off, so it's a little hairy. For that reason, being at 5 versus being at 6 doesn't change much, if anything, so I do go ahead and thin out the deck on the opponent's end step. Untap, draw another Swamp. Well, not very good, and once again, we don't have any great play here, we just kind of have to pass. The opponent looks like they're pretty flooded too, though, to be fair, so we draw Thoughtseize. And this was the big decision point of this match. It's like, alright, Thoughtseize, discard is one of the precise ways we can clear the path to try to win this exact turn and resolve our Collective Brutality. But it's a Thoughtseize. If they just have a Lightning Bolt in response, we're dead. We're dead. But I thought about it for a while, and my reasoning is that if they already have one burn spell, we're pretty unfavored here. They're again likely to draw another burn or a Snapcaster Mage before we draw another non-Thoughtseize discard spell, or just enough gas that we just play everything all at once. So I deliberated. You can see I cast it. I almost cast it, didn't cast it. In the end, I cast it. So we Thoughtseize the opponent, and we see a pretty bad hand of Dovin's Veto, double Terminus. Pretty bad against what we're up to anyway. So we simply drain them for 2 with a Collective Brutality, and that's going to be that. So interesting game insofar as how the shape of the game changed. We came out of the gates charging like crazy with Tarmogoyf into, I believe, turn 4, attack with both Tarmogoyfs plus a Treetop Village. We were really, really aggressive, and the opponent had a really high density of good early interaction. They had Path to Exile, double Snapcaster Mage, Logic Knot, a couple cryptic commands by the time they got those online. And then it pivoted to a really tense kind of standoff where both players ended up kind of top-decking pretty poorly. But the Thoughtseize proved to be the high-risk, high-reward play that did take it home for us. So that was a really interesting game. We win here on turn 13, and let's take a look at how to sideboard against Jeskai Control. Alright, my friends, so this matchup we sideboard very similarly as we do against Blue-White Control. So these 7 cards all come in. 3 Fulminator Mage, Liliana the Last Hope, Collective Brutality. Against Blue-Whites, depending on what I see specifically out of the deck, sometimes I only use 1 Spellbomb. Sometimes I use 2. Against Jeskai, I just want to use 2. They tend to be a little bit more Snapcaster heavy than the Blue-White decks. Similar to Blue-White, we cut 4 Fatal Pushes pretty easily. We cut a Blooming Marsh as well. We want to cut a land to increase our density of action, but we don't want to cut a basic because they are a Path to Exile deck. Even though it's 3 color, they're still heavy on the path. And from there, we can do a couple things. So again, against Blue-White Control, I often leave in this Abrupt Decay because they're playing just more and more 3-drop permanents. I think, again, without having seen all of the opponent's deck, I think Jeskai's less likely to do that, so I'm still pretty happy to cut my Abrupt Decay against Jeskai, even though I increasingly leave it in against Blue-White Control these days. Against Blue-White, I would cut both Kalitas and Skoos and leave in my Decay. Here against Jeskai, you cut one or the other, because we just don't have that many slots. You could make an argument for both. but I think Kalitas is just too clunky, so I'd rather just play 3 Scoozes. And, even though the Scooz can be a little bit clunky too, insofar as it just dies to a bolt, I think the CMC2 aspect of it makes it a little more appealing than Kalitas overall. But you could go either way, and maybe even get so far as to say you like Kalitas better on the play and Scooz better on the draw. Regardless, this configuration is how we set up for Game 2. Alright, my friends, coming back here on the draw against Jeskai Control, the opponent will keep 7, as will we. Our curve out is totally fine. The only thing it's missing is turn 1 discard spell, but we'll certainly take it. And we have our discard spell, it's just on turn 2, so there's some tension between playing it and playing a threat, but being on the draw here, I'm thinking at this moment I'm likely to play the discard to clear the path for not only my threats, but also for the turn 3 Liliana, who's the real game winner here. Opponent's got turn 2 Search for Azcanta, which is really good on the play against us, and we draw land, so sure, let's go with the Collective Brutality. And we see the opponent is only on a 2-lander. They've got Ashiok Dreamrender, definitely worth really making note of this, because we do have a fetch land in hand. Also definitely worth noting the rest of the contents of the hand as well. But Ashiok being new tech and being unusual, obviously we're running her in our side, but it's important to remember to play around those effects, including the -1 to shrink our Tarmogoyf. So definitely have to keep that one in mind. But they have a stacked hand, it's just low on lands. So I think the pretty clear take here is Monolith just simply going to try to punish them for keeping a low land hand by resolving a turn 3 Liliana. So the opponent does not have a 3rd land, they bind an Opt. So unless they top decked another Logic Knot or Monolith, we are in business with the Liliana. So let's run her out there, she resolves. Okay, cool, we'll tick up. We're going to pitch a Scooz, and obviously there's a few different incentives for a few different things. Pitching Trophy there is actually kind of interesting because we don't really want to ramp them at all, but of course it also hits a transformed Search for Azcanta. So I said I've got a lot of threats, I'm just going to pitch my worst threat. And as expected, I did expect them to pitch Ashiok here because she just does the least, but arguably I should have fetched anyway, right? But I chose not to, assuming they're going to pitch Ashiok, and indeed that's what they did. And they bin a path off of Search and still don't have a 3rd land, so obviously that's really good for us. We tick up. At this point we're pitching the Trophy because Nile Spellbomb allows us to clear out the graveyard, keep them off of Search for Azcanta for even longer. Baneslayer Angel hits the bin. That's great for us. And we'll run out our land first to play around Monolith, and then we will just hit the Spellbomb now, see what else we draw for turn, all that good stuff, clear out their graveyard, and then we get to deploy a threat here. I'm at high enough life total and I'm far enough ahead that I thought it was correct to shock, and of course we're playing the Tarmogoyf there because it can't just get burned. Instead it's going to get pathed just like Bob would, so that's totally fine with me. And then the opponent will bin a Lightning Helix and then finally hit their 3rd land. It's definitely a little rough for them to have gone without lands for so long, though. So this is actually a pretty tough call between Field and Quagmire. Obviously, Field hits the transformed Search, but I think the Liliana ult is incentivizing me to bin the Field and just play more man lands. So here, we know the opponent has Snap Path, right? So what does that mean? Isn't it really loose to just not play your Bob, like before they hit 4 mana for Cryptic Command, and while we have a Liliana arguably ticking up next turn, don't we want to just empty our hand? Well, if we play the Bob, the opponent's definitely going Snap Path, and then we have 3 untapped lands, and the Snapcaster can start pressuring our Liliana, take her off of the ultimate, and that's definitely not good. So by holding our Bob, we not only deny them the obvious play that they otherwise don't have much going on, we also, if they decide to just flash in the Snapcaster as a 2-1, we have the ability to block with Hissing Quagmire. So The opponent chose not to. In my opinion, they were probably supposed to. They also bin a Lightning Helix. Really interesting. Again, I might have just taken that just to burn the Liliana, but again, they choose not to. And I think they're just really desperately digging for that 4th land for a Cryptic Command so they can have the value play. But they're punished for that because we are just simply going to ult with Liliana. She's gotten so much value that I think the double Stone Rain here, which is going to either make their mana awkward or take care of the search for Azcanta, is good. They choose to keep Steam Vents in search, so they're off of white. And part of the reason we did that relatively aggressive line is because we drew another Planeswalker for turn, which is really nice. So we're going to play the Liliana first. She resolves. Then we'll play the Bob, make sure he resolves, and then, if he had been countered, maybe we buy him back or something. Maybe they had Spell Snare, but instead we'll just take the Liliana up, get her out of burn spell range. Azcanta will transform. They bin Lightning Helix, and they don't draw a land, so I guess that's just enough for the opponent. They're just going to scoop. So, really interesting game here as well. Probably pretty frustrating for the opponent, but, looks like they kept a 1 or possibly a 2-lander. If they keep a 2-lander with Search for Azcanta, I think it's reasonable to expect to hit your lands in a control deck. So, definitely unlucky for the opponent, but we punish them hard with Liliana of the Veil. She punishes stumbling very, very well, and that's precisely what happened here. I think we sequenced to maximize that for the most part, and we come away with a really clean 2-0 over Jeskai Control. So, haven't seen this deck in a while, definitely not one I really like to see, but we took him down, and we advanced to 2-0 in the league. I will see you for round 3. Alright everybody, round 3, and our hand it's got the 1-2 punch on the play. It's got the Thoughtseize into Tarmogoyf, just what we want to see, and then from there it kind of does nothing. It's a borderline keep, but I did choose to keep it on the back of not only the power of those 2 cards as a 1-2 punch, but also Treetop Village as a mana sink as a supplementary beater, and the opponent keeps 7 as well. So we just gotta hope to hit some action off the top here, but we will lead off on good old Thoughtseize, and we see Izzet Phoenix having kept a 1-lander. So, unfortunately for us, this is not a deck where we can often just really punish the 1-land keep by taking away their 1 cantrip, and then they're just really at the mercy of their top deck, because they play a million cantrips. They have 3 in the opening hand if you count looting as a It's a looting effect, kind of a cantrip, but the point is it sees more lands. They've got Opt Sleight of Hand, so we cannot actually take any of those away. Lightning Bolt is the least redundant card in their hand, and therefore it's worth considering, but it's just generally not that good of a card against us, especially when our threat here happens to be Tarmogoyf. It can kill Treetop Village, but right now, the big problem are the things in the ice, because they've got 2 of them, and we've got no removal. So I think we just have to kind of take a thing there. I think we're fairly priced into that decision, and we'll see what happens. The opponent goes Spire Bluff Canal and passes, which is interesting. You really expected to see Sleight of Hand or Faithless Looting, but maybe they're just saving those for the thing triggers. It must be the case. We have another land off the top. Pretty awful, but at least we get the classic turn 2 Tarmogoyf on the play against a red deck. Hopefully they'll just struggle to answer the Goyf, right? That's the hope. The opponent did naturally hit the second land too. That's another reason you expected the cantrip but maybe they just drew the land right off the top and they're just good to go, right? So we draw Assassin's Trophy. So, obviously this is arguably the least optimal form of removal we could have drawn. Abrupt Decay, Fatal Push, Maelstrom Pulse, Liliana of the Veil, all way better here, but I still think we're kind of just supposed to ramp them. As bad as that is, we ramp them, but we get their thing in the ice out of the way before it has any chance to even think about flipping. We clear the path, and we even grow our Tarmogoyf, right? So it's a 4-5. We get to play our Treetop Village too, but the opponent's got a handful of action. We've got nothing, so, our top decks have not been the best. Opponent's got a main deck Noxious Revival. Okay, if you all have, at least my Patreons, if you've read my Izzet Phoenix scouting report, which is what I did on the month of May, you will see just how diverse the spells that can be played, even in the main deck in these Phoenix decks, are. And there's a great example, main deck Noxious Revival. And they replay that thing. Now they cast a Sleight of Hand, because we so helpfully ramped them. And they find another land. They will fetch and shock. So interesting there. And, they are down to 10 life, so... But here comes a Faithless Looting, no birds in the yard, and it's back to us. So we draw Scavenging Ooze. Okay. Scavenging Ooze, good card in the matchup, but it does just kind of die to their Lightning Bolt. We don't have any way to grow it out of range, and we also don't have any reason to attack with the Treetop Village there. It would just be a bluff attack, which I don't think is worth doing. So even though there are windows where this is way better and circumstances where this is way better, I still think we're supposed to shock in, play the Ooze, and take away that Faithless Looting, so they can't get a really explosive Phoenix turn, or it's a lot harder for them to do so. And then, of course, they are going to bolt the Ooze, so that's unfortunate. We'll just, I guess we eat Thing in the Ice there. It gains us a life. It prevents further Noxious Revival shenanigans. Not that I expect more than one, but still. And then here comes another cantrip. Flipping the Thing in the Ice. The horror has been awoken. They're going to keep cantripping afterwards. They've got an Opt. They've got a Thought Scour, still no Phoenixes, though, so that's the good news for us. And then they're hitting us for 7. Here's the other good news, is we're not dead next turn, unless they have a Lightning Bolt. Then we might be dead to a hit. We draw Tarmogoyf. So here I was thinking, okay, worst case scenario, we attack with the Treetop Village, we put them to 3, we play Swamp, we replay Goyf, and then we pass, we chump with Goyf if we think we have to, which we probably would have. But now that we've got double Goyf, as bad as it feels to leave the free attack while they're tapped out with Treetop on the field, with them at 6, I think it is better to play both Tarmogoyfs there. And I ran out the Swamp because I don't think it is safe to fetch. Like, if they hit us for 7 at any point and we fetch, we're just dead to a gut shot. I don't want to die to a gut shot, but, obviously you could also play the fetch and then just choose not to crack it, I guess. Opponents beginning their turn with Monomorphos. They find a Looting, they pitch a couple lands, they find Thought Scour, milling over a couple cantrips, so still no Phoenixes. And the Awoken Horror is going to attack. Now, we've got a block, because again, they've got 2 unknowns in hand, we don't want to just take 7 then die to a bolt. So, the double block here is pretty good. And if they've got a bolt to follow up, well, they're going to point it at the surviving Tarmogoyf and it's going to die, and that's not great, and that's indeed what happens, but, we'd just be dead if we'd taken the hit, and I don't think chump blocking is correct either. Like, there's an argument for it maybe, but I don't think it's correct, and we're pretty flooded here, so Blooming Marsh off the top is horrible, but let's attack with the Treetop Village, see if it gets in. And their last card in hand is not another Lightning Bolt, so it does. We'll play out the Blooming Marsh, and we'll pass with fingers crossed. Opponent's got a Looting in there to flashback, not much else we care about, and they just hardcast an Arclight Phoenix, okay, but they have to pass. They have to pass because they're just dead on board to the Treetop Village, and we finally draw a premier piece of removal. It's Liliana of the Veil. So, our top decks were middling at best, but Liliana there was just perfect. I love, obviously a lot of different things would do it. Even Fatal Push does it because we have the ability to get Revolt. Trophy, Decay, Pulse, they all do it. But Liliana of the Veil, coming down for the clean Edict kill, there's just nothing like it. It's just so BGX, you gotta love it. So it was a close game with us keeping a land-heavy hand and then kind of flooding out and having some pretty awkward, lack of removal relative to what we normally see. The opponent went off, the opponent did their thing, but what the opponent never really got were the Phoenixes online. Like, They had a lot of density of action. They had the things. They had their recursion for the things. They flipped it on curve. They got a lot of action out of it, but they never got the birds going, and that's really what did it. So, close game, but in that one could really have gone either way, hard. But as it is, both decks kind of, half-whiffed, and we came out victorious in the end, thanks to the efforts of our friendly ape village. So, good game, and let's take a look at how we sideboard against Izzet Phoenix. Alright, my friends, so against Phoenix, we're bringing in all of our Grave Hate. We've got 2 Surgicals, 2 Spell Bombs, and indeed a Grafdigger's Cage as well. They have other ways to beat us without depending on the graveyard, but I'm pretty happy committing fully to the Graveyard Hate, especially now that Pyromancer's Ascension is a significant piece of technology. The other win conditions, like Crackling Drake, is not as common as it used to be. Thing in the Ice, of course, is still a major part of the plan. They've got like a Planeswalker or 2 possibly from the side, but our regular main deck stuff lines up pretty well against Thing in the Ice, pretty well against the other value pieces, so we just really need to shut down the graveyard, in my opinion. So not only are we bringing in these 5 pieces, but also Ashiok to repeatedly empty out the yard and shut off their fetches. So pretty cool. Damnation to round out the sideboarding technology. So what do we bring out? Well, I'm pretty comfortable moving away from a Tireless Tracker here. It's just a little bit slow. We don't want to see multiples. 1 is usually fine, 2 not so much. So we shave 1. We shave a Liliana the Last Hope. They do kill our things. She can buy them back. That's fine. But again, just slow, and her +1 is very underwhelming in this matchup. That's the big reason. That's the big reason she's got to go. So how I side from there depends a little bit on the player, the draw. We have still 5 cuts to make, and Dark Confidant and Thoughtseize are kind of the, we're trying to decide how much pain we can afford to take, basically. So I like leaning a little bit more heavily on Bob's on the play than the draw. And by more heavily, I mean on the draw, we're going to take out all 4. And that means we just shave 1 Thoughtseize and we play with 2. On the play, I can see bringing back exactly 1 Bob, cutting a Thoughtseize. We can leverage 1 Bob. There's no way we want to see multiples, but the 1 is sometimes fine. Gut Shot is less common than it used to be as well. So, if you're really low on the Bob, you can just leave him out and just play with 2 Thoughtseizes and or maybe, on the play, trim a Thoughtseize, bring back a threat or something, right? But this is how I sideboard in the matchup, so if we were on the play, it would look like this, but because we're on the draw, it is going to look like this. Let's go to game 2. Well, my friends, we're on the play against Phoenix, and we certainly can't keep a no-lander. The opponent likes their 7, we don't. We go down to 6, and this is a fine one. It's a fine one. Scooz is a good card in the matchup. Hissing Quagmire on the top. Yeah, I mean, that's also fine. I really don't mind utility lands almost ever. As you can see in this league alone, they're big, big parts of how we win. But in this case, we're pretty happy to bottom it. And Grafdigger's Cage is a nice draw, but we're going to lead on Inquisition for a variety of reasons. This actually can protect our cage. We take away the Abrade if they've got that in the hand, then we can freely deploy the cage. This also allows us to just generally see what we're supposed to play around insofar as when we can deploy our Scooz, so on and so forth. Pardon me, got a phone call. Alright, my friend, sorry about that. We are back. That was my friend calling. He's a Liverpool fan for any soccer fans here on the channel, and Liverpool's pulling a crazy comeback in the Champions League right now, apparently, so he's pretty excited about that, and rightfully so. But back to our Inquisition. So we see, again, a really nice hand on the opponent's side. Echoing Truth is interesting tech. Once again, the Lightning Bolt. The Monomorphose is kind of the glue to the deck. It's never really a bad take. Pyromancer Ascension, this is the most dangerous card in their deck. However, we do have Abrupt Decay to answer it, and then a Sleight of Hand just to round things out. So I went ahead and took away the Monomorphose, knowing that we have the out to the Ascension. The other take was Lightning Bolt, just to protect our Skoos and have pretty much free reign to play it. However, I think I rate my ability to disrupt them, like their really good turns by taking away the Monomorphose a little bit highly than via Skoos at this exact window, because I have the Grafdigger's Cage in hand, among other things. We draw a Trophy. Okay, not bad. It's more gas, it's more action. So even the Fetch Shock there decision there was interesting, because they may play Blood Moon, and that's something to be worried about. On the other hand, we kind of need double black to cast Liliana if we draw her, which is of course, nightmare if we find her and can't cast her. So I went for the Fetch Shock. Not great, but not ideal in a couple different ways for life total and for Blood Moon. But in any case, it's back to the opponent. They make their third land drop. They can trip a couple times, and then it is back to us. So I believe they played this island, and so there's 2 unknowns in hand plus Lightning Bolt and Echoing Truth, and we draw Tarmogoyf. So Tarmogoyf is a great play here. I was going to be very happy to just play the Cage and pass, which gives me some layer of safety against the Phoenixes again, but I think you've got to play the Tarmogoyf in that spot. So the opponent plays Thing in the Ice, they play a fetch land, and they pass. We draw Inquisition. Inquisition's a nice one. That's what we'll start out with. Or that's what we thought about starting out with, but I did decide to attack with the Tarmogoyf first, and actually the major reason for that is Echoing Truth. So if they decide to try to just tempo us out, like bounce the Goyf with Truth, and then plan to bounce it again when they flip Thing down the road a turn or two, they might choose to do that in a response to an Inquisition, but they probably won't just choose to do that out of nowhere. So that's why we attack first. Then in the second main, we will play Inquisition. Opponent's fetching in response, so they will opt, sure. Opt resolves, and then we see another Thing in the Ice. So once again, it's just Truth and Bolt, and I think it's a pretty clear take of the Thing there. So we could play the Cage and try to hope they don't draw a third spell, but I don't think that's likely. I think we just take our clean window, trophy the Thing in the Ice away. Ramping them is not a big deal at all anymore. They've already got all the mana they need. But they top deck a Faithless Looting, so that's actually a really good top deck. They get rid of Mountain and Lightning Bolt. Alright. I'm a little bit worried. I've put off my Cage for a few turns, so I'm a little bit worried about a big Phoenix turn. And of note is the Blood Moon they pitched. So interesting that they pitched it, because we're only on 1 basic, and also interesting that it's in the deck at all. Regardless, they do pitch it, so they've got some apparently better stuff in hand, and there goes the Echoing Truth as well. So 2 unknowns. We draw Forest. Forest is a fine draw. Let's attack with the good old Goyf. Hit for 5. Play the Forest, and we will play the Skoos here. And once again, we're going to kind of put off the Cage. I think while they're tapped out, while they're off of red, we're just supposed to eat their 2 creatures. This is obviously growing the ooze out of Lightning Bolt range and all that good stuff. And just generally putting lethal on board is nice. Opponent's got Chandra, so I can see why they valued Chandra over Blood Moon in this situation. And while Bolt cannot take care of a 4/4 Skoos, Chandra sure can. So we no longer have lethal on board, and we also have the Chandra to worry about. Hissing Quagmire is an okay draw. It just gives us more closeout power. So I am going to send the Treetop Village at Chandra for sure. We don't want her to dig 1 card deeper next turn, or to add mana for a really crazy turn. I think we're just supposed to answer her. So 5 to the opponent, 3 to Chandra. That all gets through. Then we play our Grafdigger's Cage for good measure, and play the Hissing Quagmire. So even if they can block or deal with the Goyf, 2 hits from our manlands is going to do it. Opponent will hardcast a Phoenix, sure. We draw land, okay, not the most exciting. So here I chose to fire up Hissing Quagmire because I would rather trade that for a Lightning Bolt than Treetop Village. Either way, it looks like they're chumping the Goyf here, so if one of their other 2 cards in hand is Bolt, I'd rather lose my Quagmire than the Treetop Village, and the opponent is indeed chumping, and they don't have the Bolt, so they take the hit. They're down to 3, we play a land. The reason I played a land there is because if I draw another untapped land for next turn, we can fire up both man lands, which I think is worth doing, rather than sandbagging that land for the usual reasons of Collective Brutality or Tireless Tracker. Opponent's got Pyromancer Ascension, so that's a good one. There's a nice full graveyard, and it's a way they get value out of the graveyard that Grafdigger's Cage does not really shut off. And right away they play a Sleight of Hand to get a counter, and then right away they follow up with the Serum Visions to get another counter, so their Ascension is live. They're copying every instant or sorcery spell, but they're down to 1 mana, and they're on the ropes, and they just scoop it up. So that was, it looked like we crushed them. We're at 19, they're at 3, we've got a hate piece down, we've got a 6-7 Goyf, but really, if they got to untap one more turn, they could possibly have gone absolutely crazy with this Pyromancer Ascension. So that was definitely a tough one and a close one, despite the fact that, on paper we kind of ran away with it. But a couple good games against Phoenix, and even though the matchup doesn't always go our way, you can see here how we are favored, how things that we're naturally up to, like playing Tarmogoyfs, playing Scavenging Oozes, playing Discard, playing Catch-All Pieces of Removal. We saw Liliana of the Veil game 1. A lot of our stuff does line up just naturally pretty well against Phoenix. Again, it's the most consistent deck in the format, just about. It's far from a free win, but we are favored, and I think we saw that here. So, good stuff, my friends, and we advanced to 3-0 in this league, 6-0 in our game, so it's been really smooth sailing. I hope you're enjoying this, and let's go to round 4. Alright, my friends, round 4 on the play with a nice curve out. We've got push potentially into Bob and to Tracker, and we've got the 4 lands to make Tracker good. We've got a little utility from our land base, so we've got it all. Opponent's on another Celestial Colonnade deck, so very happy that we're on the play here so we can just resolve our Bob, see what happens. So the opponent's going to path to exile Bob. Now, pathing the Bob, I have no problem with that play. I think that's a totally fine one, but I really think they should have waited to upkeep path, and now we get to live the dream of turn 3 Tireless Tracker. Obviously, there is a world in which we'd want to Inquisition first. I think with only Island open, we don't need to. So, Tracker into Verdant Catacombs, and we just fetch main phase again because they only have Island open. Then we're going to shock and play that Inquisition as a follow-up. When I said play Inquisition first, I meant Inquisition into Goyf, right? But the Tracker value against this specific deck is way too good. So, in any case, the opponent has 3 total lands. They also have some new tech in the form of Narset Parter of Veils. So Narset is going to make our clue cracking awkward, at least. She also can minus to dig for action. And I think this card is kind of the sleeper in the format, out of War of the Spark, in Eternal format. So I think there are lots of shells in which she will really shine. So keep an eye out for her. Remember to play around her passive. But we also see Detention Sphere and Logic Knot. We also see Cryptic and Jace, so their hand is stacked, and it does appear to be straight blue-white control, unlike Jeskai that we faced in round 2. So here, as good as Narset is, we can very easily... They can't play her anytime soon. She's just going to get attacked off the board, no problem. So we either take Logic Knot or Detention Sphere. I think it's a pretty easy D-Sphere there, because not only is that a pretty clean answer to Tracker, it also, if they have... pick up something better to do and successfully extend the game, they could at some point de-sphere our clues, which is not cool. Not cool at all. So the opponent drew Snapcaster Mage for a turn. Well, that's a pretty good one. Snap Path is definitely fine. And then we pick up an Abrupt Decay. So the opponent's tapped out, so we're definitely looking to resolve some things under the Logic Knot here, and that said, we will crack a clue first, and we're rewarded for that majorly, because we get Liliana the Last Hope, not only resolving her under the Logic Knot, but ticking up to kill a Snapcaster Mage. Now we can just jam, like, Goyf into counter magic and just buy it back. It's pretty great. So, we draw Dark Confidant, sure. Think that's even better than Tarmogoyf, so we'll try the Bob. And they're going to respond with a cryptic command to bounce Liliana and counter the Bob. So that's a pretty good play for them insofar as slowing down our progression goes. I think they would have got punished for that if we had a land to play for turn, because then we get to do it all and they didn't draw a card. As it is, I'm still fine with this. We're just taking our value. The opponent doesn't get to draw off their cryptic command. That's always fine with me if the game is relatively even or we are a little bit ahead, which I think the current truth of the matter is somewhere in that realm. So the opponent finally has to tap out for the Jace. I say has to. It's not ideal for them because there's a treetop village on board. They do have a land, so we have to, wonder about like a path or a condemn here, but I still think the first order of business is to try to get the Jace off the field. And we do. Wonderful. So we'll take up our Liliana. And once again, our turn is a little bit awkward because we haven't found a land, so we can only really do one thing, and the one thing should probably be Bob. We could take the high-risk play of cracking a clue, hoping to find a land and then have Bob as well, but I'd rather just play the Bob. We're holding up Fatal Push this way as well for whatever that's worth. The opponent's got another Jace, so, things have not gone as smoothly as they could have, that is for sure. Given how powerful our position is, now we've kind of got to deal with another Jace after we spent resources dealing with him last turn, right? But at least we've got the ability to do so, and we are still very far ahead. Assassin's Trophy is the flip, and I was tempted to just simply try to trophy away the Jace and see what happens, but then I said, no, let's not be cavalier with our resources, let's just be really patient, keep outgrinding them, and we'll try to attack Jace off the field with both, just for good measure, and, it's better against one removal spell. And that works, so the opponent's got a logic knot in hand that they're representing, so I'm pretty happy to simply finally play another land and pass holding up all kinds of stuff. Clue, trophy, decay, push. And the opponent's making land drops, they play a Narset. And then they're going to fetch, and this was a play that I considered making. I want to point it out here. I decided not to, but they haven't activated Narset. I could have decayed her in response to the fetch, and I thought maybe I should. But I was just saying, she's so easy to attack off the field right now. Maybe I'll just wait and see what else they do with the turn. They found a Serum Visions off of the Narset, sure. And, so again, maybe I should have just taken that window to decay. Definitely worth pointing out. I chose not to. Might have been fine. Might have been incorrect. We're just burying them in value with this Dark Confidant. So once again, I'm inclined to try to attack these things off the board rather than spend my spells on them. So we're gonna fire up the treetop. The opponent's going to hit it with Field of Ruin, and now I'm finally saying, okay, let's just decay the Narset. It's at least an efficient use of our mana there, so I'm pretty happy with that. And then the Bob gets to swing. In some situations, it might be worth just not attacking with the Bob, because they could have Condemn or something, but we're far enough ahead on cards, and we're getting behind on life, so I think we are supposed to attack. And sure, that works. So what do we do next? Well, we're starting to get to the point where we're worried about their powerful late-game stuff like Snap, Caster Mage, and a Cryptic Command. Also worried about sweeper effects, so let's just try the Scoos, see if it resolves. I'm pretty happy to just content myself with the Scoos, but it looks like they're finally going to use that Logic Knot. And of course that's fine with us, because we get to continue the value chain. We buy back the Scoos, we replay it, and we pass. And we're very, very far ahead of the opponent as far as resources go. They've got that Serum Visions they found off of Narset to begin. And then they've got another Jace, so the Jace value has been real. It's really extended the game for them, but fortunately we have been in a position to answer the Jace. And the opponent's, only on 3 mana, so pretty fine with me. Pretty free also to fetch there without going shields down on the Scoos, because they don't have removal. They don't have, Snap Path while we're fetched, right? So, Thoughtseize and Collective Brutality, well, these are some fine draws, and I think we're just going to begin on the Thoughtseize and see what happens. they've got Dovin's Veto and Celestial Colonnade, so they've got really nothing. It's just a matter of making sure we don't die to top decks and to Colonnade beats, right? So, once again, we're going to play it pretty patiently instead of spending a trophy on Jace. We are just going to attack him off the field. We know that's free. We'll play a Tarmogoyf to really increase the clock, but we're not going too wide because their best way into this is, back into this is a top-decked Verdict or a Terminus. So, we're kind of halfway in between going wide and playing too slow, right? We're trying to find the mean here. And the opponent passes, so end step here, I am going to trophy away a Colonnade, the untapped one, of course, because this makes our attacks better, and then we'll pass. Could maybe have eaten some stuff with a Scooz, probably doesn't matter. Now I'm going to escalate my Brutality, pitching Dark Confidant. I'm pretty happy with that, because I'm realistically not going to play the Confidant anytime in the rest of this game. This is fuel for Scooz, fuel for Brutality. And the discard mode whiffs, but we do drain for 2, which is nice, and we see the Snapcaster in the opponent's hand. So, alright, we have answers to everything. So we move to attacks, the opponent flashes in Snap, but we get to eat, in response, the target, which was Cryptic Command, and the opponent just scoops there. Now, it would have been interesting to say, do we push the Snapcaster Mage so we have clean attacks here? I would need to do the math on that, but it might be tempting to just hold push, kill it with Liliana, whatever. But regardless, the opponent had seen enough. We were far enough ahead. They were just simply not going to come back from that. Even if they top deck the Sweeper effect, we are going to tick our Lily up, then buy stuff back. We've got going to have 5 cards in hand when we untap next. Yeah, so the game's pretty much over. So we're going to move on to round 2 here, and the sideboarding is going to be exactly the same as I showed you against Jeskai Control, except I'm going to leave my Abrupt Decay in, like I said, because, like I said then, Blue-White is playing more cards like Detention Sphere and wherever Narset went. Narset Parter avails, right? So the Decay shines here in the matchup more than it does against your average Jeskai deck. So I cut both Scooz and Kalitas. 1 Scooz, 1 Kalitas to keep that Decay in. Otherwise, the sideboarding is the same. And let's go to game 2. And here we are on the draw for round 2 against Blue-White Control. The opponent has kept 7. We've got a tempting one-lander. It really is tempting. It's got a lot of really good stuff. If we just hit a land in our first 2 draw steps, we are off to the races with Thoughtseize into Bob, and who knows from there, right? But at the end of the day, I thought it was a little high risk to keep. I would certainly keep a 6 that looked like that. If that was a 6- of tracker or something, I would keep. But I decided to mull, and this is a pretty fine 6, right? Collective Brutality is another fine one. I put that on the top, and let's go. So the opponent goes Flooded Strand, pass, and we will go Fetch, Shock, Inquisition U. And we see another really well-balanced hand. They've got 3 lands. They're likely to hit the 4th in time to play Jace. And they've got Celestial Purge, Logic Knot, Snapcaster Mage. They've kind of got a little bit of everything. So I'm basically hoping that we can, either top deck some good stuff that we can force through, like maybe we top deck Liliana of the Veil. So for that reason, I took away Logic Knot, planning to go turn 2 Collective Brutality, maybe turn 3 Liliana. We draw another Dark Confidant, which admittedly is pretty nice, but since it just dies to Celestial Purge, I would rather lead on the Brutality here. We do get the Purge out of their hand, and we see that they have made their land drops, so, again, they were always likely to, but it is a little bit tough, because now they've got Snapcaster Mage available for those things as well. Plus, of course, just the Jason curve. So they play a land, they pass back to us, and we're drawing more good 2-drops. We draw Tarmogoyf, so I guess we just kind of play a 2-drop here and hope for the best. The opponent runs out a land, and this was an interesting spot because they flashed in Snapcaster, obviously planning to purge the Bob, and they misclicked. They got the Logic Knot, And they said in chat, oops, and that is a pretty major oops back to us. So it is nice. Definitely was a nice misclick for us. Our hand continues to be like nothing but 2-drop, so I guess that's pretty fine with me. And I think the play here is to just go as wide as possible. So I chose to just diversify my threats. We're holding a Bob and a Goyf in hand. We've got one of each plus a Scooz on field. I think that is totally fine. And we're definitely not attacking with the Bob into the Snapcaster, right? So we just pass. And the opponent's got the Jace. Sure, so one of the reasons we went so wide at the risk of them having a top-decked sweeper is because we know they've got the Jace, and we know we need to pressure him successfully. So they will brainstorm, they will pass. And we have yet another Tarmogoyf. We also have a Thoughtseize flipped off of the Bob. So the Thoughtseize is potentially good here. We'll play it. We see Dovin's Veto. Don't care about that whatsoever at the moment. Then Logic Knot and Snapcaster Mage. So we pretty clearly just take the Snapcaster Mage there, in my view. And then we are attacking the Jace with both. And there's no blocks, so we don't need to do any activating here. And I chose to just go as wide as possible here, and, again, still with a Bob and a Goyf to rebuild post-sweeper, still holding up a Scooz activation, so I think we're in a pretty good spot, despite the fact that they did just have a Jace activation. Now they have another Jace, so pretty great top deck for them, which I guess they did put on the top with their previous Brainstorm, right? But in any case, it's the Jace, it's the Brainstorm, and it's passing back to us. And we're going to grow the Ooze on the end step so it can attack freely into the Mage without having to eat. And we just see a couple lands for turn, good lands admittedly. So what I chose to do here is send 2 at Jace and 1 at the opponent, because we do need to start ending the game here. And it's only bad if they brainstormed into a removal spell for 1 mana, and that's exactly what happens. So sure, I mean, it's not great, but we do trade 1 for 1 there. They have to chump block, and we get through for 4, so it's not bad. Treetop Village is the play. No need for our Field of Ruin quite yet. I'd rather play the Manland. And at this point, after 2 back-to-back Jace activations, I'm a little scared of a top-deck sweeper, so I chose not to play anything else out. And it looks like my instincts were correct, because they did set up a Terminus, and I wasn't even necessarily sure that they were on Terminus, right? But they definitely are. They definitely set it up, so yeah, this is what they needed. They needed a sweeper effect here for sure. And I will just clear all of the spells, the non-creature, or the instant and sorcery spells out of their yard in response. And there goes my board. So Jace is brainstorming again, which, so maybe a little risky against the Treetop Village on field, but that's the line they chose. We draw Nile Spellbomb, so that's fine. We'll play out a land first to play around any Logic Knot style effects, which we know they have one. And now we're making their Logic Knots a lot worse by emptying out their graveyard with Spellbomb while cantripping, so that's pretty nice. And then, so here I could just, I can't just attack with Treetop Village because they've got the Field of Ruin, so maybe minor correction to what I said last turn, but, so all we can really do here is play out our stuff. Opponent's got a Cryptic Command, counter and draw. Sure, you got it. And then we can just follow up with another threat. I chose the Bob here. You could go either way, but, Cryptic Command's a really nice find for them, that is for sure. So they've still, I believe, got Logic Knot and Dovin's Veto in hand, and they're brainstorming again. So lots of brainstorms with Jace, and they find another removal spell. Yeah, pretty bad. They're starting to stabilize, and the Field of Ruin is really what's allowing them to do so, right? So back to us, and we draw Liliana the Last Hope, so that's pretty good. But I decided that it was best this turn to simply make removing Jace the #1 priority, because we know they have double counter magic in hand now. Logic Knot is good at the moment. Dovin's Veto obviously takes care of Liliana, so I think it's correct here to just fire up our manlands, try to attack the Jace down. Of course, they have Field for Treetop. maybe we can get Jace next turn with that Hissing Quagmire, but he's brainstorming again. They find a Field of Ruin, so oof, that is rough. And we draw Abrupt Decay, also pretty rough. And I don't think there's anything we can do here. I don't think we should just run out our stuff into Logic Knot and Dovin's Veto. And Abrupt Decay has no target, so we're just kind of passing. I don't think we don't have enough mana to fire up the Quagmire, take them off of mana, and then play spells either. That's just not really live. So unfortunately, their Jace, their second Jace of the match, hanging on by the skin of his teeth and just brainstorming like crazy. So it's not good for us, and we draw another Tarmogoyf, so I think now it's time to just start jamming spells. They've got Cryptic Command, sure. We've got another Tarmogoyf. And the opponent's got the Logic Knot, so now we've got Lily the Last Hope. Buyback, Goyf, Skoos, or Bob. In this case, I chose Bob. We just kind of need to rebuild as best as we can. And killing the Jace is still our priority. Bob's just as good as Goyf at doing that, just about. But the Jace is brainstorming one too many times, and he does finally find his buddy, his good buddy Teferi. So here comes the bad part of the game when it's Jace and Teferi, and they've got counter magic. So now we just have to kind of jam spells into counter magic. We've got to keep trying to overload them. Playing at KG against those two cards doesn't really work. And the tracker does resolve, which is a nice glimmer of hope. Sadly, there's no land to follow it up. That would be awesome. That would be really, really good. But I think this Logic Knot is gone, and then they're just, seeing so many cards now. And they have another path. Pretty inevitable with all those brainstorms and the Teferi +1s. And here comes Colonnade and, this Abrupt Decay. So this is why this card is sometimes sided out against blue-white control, because as you can see, it cannot hit Colonnade, and it cannot hit either of their Planeswalkers. Now, again, I stand by the decision to keep it in against the current decks that are playing a lot of D-Sphere, a lot of Narset, even some cards like Gideon of the Trials. They're playing a lot more Vendilion Click than they used to, so I think it's still correct to leave it in over, like, a Skoos or a Kalitas, but you can see why it is a fringe card in the matchup rather than a slam dunk. Opponent's just going off over their Field of Ruin activation, hitting our field, and still having enough to keep their own field up. So we draw a Bob, which is fine, but at this point we are pretty dead, so I'm just going to hit play here, and the reason I kept playing is for the purposes of the clock. So we'll talk a little bit more as we let the game go on. As you can see, we've closed the gap on the clock a little bit. I think we were like 2.5 minutes behind after game 1. Now it's close to even, and they're the ones taking all the game actions, right? So they're just going crazy. They do have a Narset showing up, and lots and lots of value over there. Jace, Teferi, Colonnade, so on. Our Abrupt Decay does finally have a good target, and it's the Narset. We draw a Trophy, so we'll pass, and then we'll try to upkeep Trophy the Teferi. Don't expect it to work, but again, we're just kind of casting our spells and trying to eat up their clock. Of course, they have had that Dovin's Veto just about all game. Finally gets us with it. And now they're trying to end, so here comes Colonnade. Field of Ruin's a good draw if all we're trying to do is extend the game, really. But they get the Teferi ultimate, so they force the field activation here and now. So it's not great, but again, we're just playing along, we're out of basics, so on and so forth. So the game is well and truly lost, but as you can see, we're now pulling ahead on the clock, and with game 3 in the offing, it could become relevant. So again, just jamming our spells, forcing them to take actions, and eating up the clock here. So pretty rough. We were definitely about a turn away from just winning this game if we could have just finished off a Jace, or if they just didn't have that set up that Terminus. It's really hard to say, but we were ahead for the crucial stages of the game, and it looks like the opponent just clung on for just long enough to get there. So Snapcaster Mage helps increase the clock here at the end, and that's that. So, cool basics, by the way. Onslaught, brother. Love your choice in basics. And we also get to see they play Blast Zone. So, definitely worth just playing as we did here, just making them execute the kill. We're now a full 2 minutes ahead on the clock, which is very relevant. When we could have reasonably scooped, we were still behind on the clock. So not only did we get more information, we know there's a Blast Zone in the deck, we also took back the clock. So, yeah, pretty tough, but let's go to Game 3 with an advantage on the clock. Alright, my friends, Game 3 against Blue-White, and our hand is definitely pretty weak, but we have, considering how land-heavy it is, we've got the good utility. Treetop Village and Field are both great, especially getting Treetop down on the play is great, and we have the best card in the matchup. We have the Liliana of the Veil, so I think we have to keep this, even though I've definitely seen better hands. And the opponent, unfortunately, is keeping 7 all game. We really would have loved to see a mulligan here. That would have been just perfect for us. But it's not to be, and sadly, we top deck yet another land. So, far from ideal. Really wanted to top deck discard or a 2-drop, but instead it's another fetch land. And the opponent plays Plains, and Plains is actually kind of fine with me because it means they don't have Logic Knot. So they probably just have a 1 of Mana Leak as the only thing in their deck, or Dovin's Veto, of course, as well, we saw, as the only things that can really hit Liliana. Alright, we're drawing stuff in the wrong order. We really wish we had the Goyf last turn, but there's no way we do anything here but try to jam the Lily. It's just what our hand does, right? It's just a Liliana game, if we can make it that way. And then we see them paying costs, and it's their 1 of Mana Leak, I'm sure, and that's just rough. It's just rough. That really was our major play, and then we insult to injury, draw yet another land, and it's a basic. So, pretty bad. But we do have Tarmogoyf, we still have utility from the land base, and we have the clock advantage. So I'm just kind of playing fast here, trying to stay ahead on the clock. And, unfortunately, they've answered everything we've done so far. They had Leak for Liliana, they got Path for the Goyf. They're making their land drops, but there's no Cryptic Command at the moment. So we've got a really good window to draw a really good card, and we draw another land. So, yeah, what are you going to do? Definitely attacking with the Treetop here. That is realistic win condition at this point, is just attacking with manlands and seeing how far that gets us. So we'll play the other one, and we'll pass. Okay, opponent's got a Colonnade, and they've got Jace. Well, Jace is quite annoying, but we'll let him brainstorm. And obviously Trophy is pretty live there, but I think I would, again, much like in Game 1, just prefer to attack him off the field with Treetop. We don't have spells to burn, right? We don't really have spells to burn, so we don't want to throw them away willy-nilly. And Collective Brutality, we finally draw a little action, so I chose here to escalate. We're draining for 2 by pitching one of our extraneous lands, and of course we are attacking the hand. And we see, of course they've got the Teferi as well, so it's very bad for us. Dovin's Veto, Logic Knot, Serum Visions, their hand is not entirely great otherwise. I took away Logic Knot because they're definitely Teferiing next turn, I would assume. And we can use our trophy to kill Teferi while they're tapped down, and then if we, in subsequent turns, if we draw creatures, they can't counter it with Dovin's Veto, right? So that's the logic there, and that's also why we play Catacombs out instead of Field. So the opponent will fetch and lead on the Serum Visions, makes sense. And then it is Teferi time, and unlike with Jace, because as powerful as Jace is, more powerful in Eternal formats, Jace is just a better designed card than Teferi. You have to actually make decisions with Jace. With Teferi, you just always play him and just basically always plus. So we cannot assume our manlands will get through to take him down, so we've got a trophy while they're tapped. And then we top deck a Liliana of the Veil, so it's pretty unfortunate here that she came at this exact order. I chose to run her out into the known Dovin's Veto. This might have been a mistake, but they're at 11 life. I'm really interested in just trading with their stuff and just trying to win with my manlands. So this makes it so, like, they don't have Snapcaster Mage this turn. They've got to have, like, a 1-mana removal spell for them to interact in any way, and they don't. So that was the logic there, but under other circumstances, like if the life totals were more even and we had like maybe one more, piece of gas around somewhere, I think we could have held on to the Liliana and tried to make it a Lily game. But the other reason not to do that is because they do have a Colonnade to answer the Lily, right? Like, we have Field of Ruin and all that, but it's just a little late to go all in on a Liliana of the Veil, in my opinion. So Tarmogoyf is a fine draw. Once again, I'm just kind of jamming it. If they've got counter magic, they have to actually tap low for this incentive. This frees up space for our manlands. Unfortunately for us, they have Spell Snare, so they just get to kind of hold up everything. And like, if they had to at least tap low enough where they couldn't activate Colonnade, then that would have been fine. We fire up a manland, they have to probably field it, and then we're considering, or we're one step closer to kind of breaking through. But as is, the Spell Snare was pretty nice, so they field our Treetop on the end step. We use that mana to field their Colonnade in response. Not that we really needed to, but again, trying to stay ahead on the clock, we're just kind of taking actions here, and there's no real reason not to. Opponent's got a Snapcaster Mage at the end of the turn, just snapping in for Optin just to get a body down. That, that's a thing. So here Snapcaster Mage goes for the attack, and I actually thought a lot about blocking, but in the end I chose not to. I think it'd be loose to trade there because we are at such a high life total, and it is blue-white control, but Tireless Tracker is a fine draw, but we're going to attack with the Quagmire first, see what happens. And Quagmire connects, so the fact that Quagmire has connected makes me incentivized to play out the tracker. Now, again, like the Liliana, in other circumstances, we would sandbag this in the hope of drawing lands, but number one, the longer we sandbag it, the likelier it is that they just draw counter magic for it. So there's an argument, because the opponent's at 6, just to treat this as a Balduvian Barbarians, just to treat this as a 3-2 and just get it down under counter magic. So that's the line we took. And the opponent's got no removal, no counter. So Snapcaster Mage is attacking. Now, this makes me think they have a sweeper in hand. However, I think it's better to make them have it rather than just to take the block and then they can sweep my next creature, right? So I make them, I don't take the block even though I'm suspicious of a sweeper here. And sure enough, it's a hard cast Terminus. You got it. So they've got 3 cards in hand. They are ahead on resources. Nile Spellbomb's a fine draw. We definitely play it, and we definitely use it right away, looking for a redraw, getting our value, clearing out their yard, all that good stuff. And we find a Scooz. Scooz is fine, but it's kind of just a 2-2 at this exact moment. So under other circumstances, we might just play the Scooz there and then pass, holding up its activations. But now I think we're supposed to attack with the Quagmire. See what happens. Celestial Purge. Okay, that's unusual. You don't see that hitting a land every day, that is for sure, but that's definitely an answer. So we follow up with the Scooz. Opponent's got a Colonnade. Only 2 cards in hand. And another Terminus. So you got it. They've just been answering our stuff, and we draw Collective Brutality. Yeah, I chose to hold on to it. Obviously, you could argue that we're just supposed to, use it right then and there, try to get whatever's out of their hand, but realistically, I don't think they have an instant or sorcery in hand unless it's yet another sweeper effect. I really don't. So I chose to hang on to it because it's a finisher, it's, better as the game goes on, potentially, all that good stuff. So Colonnade's getting in, and unfortunately, we draw Swamp. So we're just kind of holding our stuff again. And the opponent's just firing up Colonnade again. So, we're down to 5. and we draw Dark Confidant. So, okay, that's incentive enough. It's not a great draw, but it's incentive enough to go in on our brutality, and we see the opponent just has 3 removal spells in hand. So we're in a lot of trouble. We take away the best one, which is Purge. We drain them for 2. Unfortunately, that does not increase their clock at all, and we just kind of have to play our Bob out. They could path it. If they path it, whatever. If they decide to hold up Condemn, we can maybe choose not to attack, and we can draw, like... The ideal situation here is to flip Field of Ruin off of Bob and then draw some kind of action for turn, like a Liliana or something. But Colonnade's going to hit us, and then the opponent's got a Jace. So now we need to, now they unsummon the Jace, or the Bob, so I don't know if we have any outs. I guess we just have to hit Field, but we don't. We draw another Bob. So... Ooh, we were on a roll, my friends. We were cruising through this league, and then even cruising through the first match of Blue-White Control, but they got us. They got us here, and this one felt kind of bad. It was a great game 1, and it felt like it was going to be a great game 2. They just barely stabilized, they stuck around, and they turned the corner on us. And then here in game 3, we were kind of all in on our Liliana resolving, and hitting some decent top decks through the mid-game. Neither of those happened, and what are you going to do? That's just the game. So, our 5-0 dreams have been ruined by the villains named Jason Teferi. Ebony and Ivory taking us down yet again. But, lately I've been doing pretty well against the matchup, and ironically, it's the most traditional-looking Blue-White Control deck that actually beats us. The stuff with the newer tech... I've been doing a little bit better against. But regardless, we were really close to getting the win here. It was a good game. Well done to the opponent. Let's go on to round 5. All right, my friends, round 5, final round of this competitive league, and we are trolled by our own deck with an unplayable hand. 5 lands, 2 spells, low curve, everything's 1 or 2, but we've got 2 Fields of Ruin, so automatic mulligan. And this is a fine 6. It's a really well-balanced 6. We don't know what we're up against, but the opponent's keeping 7. We've taken a lot of mulligans this league, and I don't believe our opponent has mulled once thus far. We keep that 3rd land on top, even though it's awkward to have them in this order. Would be obviously nice to play the Quagmire first. But what are you going to do? We still take the 3rd land, and we see we are against humans. Ancient Ziggurat into Noble Hierarch, definitely a humans deck. So we play out the Quagmire, and we are going to push Noble Hierarch. Alternatively, we could have played Catacombs and killed it with Collective Brutality. The reason I didn't do that is because they are almost certainly going to play out a 2-drop next turn, or maybe like another 1-drop creature, and it's unlikely they have 2 1-drops next turn, basically. That's the only way we're kind of punished for this. Because if they just have only a 1-drop, or they just have only a 2-drop, we can Liliana Edict it away. Now, if it's Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, that also changes the math. Fortunately, it's not Thalia, it is her lieutenant, so I am very happy to just play the Liliana, Edict that away. We get a forest there because we have Skoos in hand. We already have double black without it. And the opponent's got Deputy of Detention to take away our Liliana, which looked like it was going to be a little awkward until we top-decked a fetch land, which conveniently allows us to get Revolt, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. So we push the Deputy, we get our Liliana back, and, I actually almost didn't do that, because it would have been interesting to play the Skoos, play the fetch land, and say go. Then we could choose whether or not to push the Deputy next turn or to push an alternative play. And maybe that was the best line. But, I think just getting the Liliana back, getting an activation is obviously really nice. The main reason I considered an alternative line is because, of course, we're pitching something good either way here. So we pitched the Brutality, clearly the one to pitch over Skoos in this situation. But hoping we get gas out of their hand, and we basically do. We get a Horizon Canopy out, so sure. And we are empty-handed. The best card the opponent could have here is Mantis Rider. So, needless to say, that's what they have. Pretty interesting. I imagine that's a top deck, because I think they would have just played it and killed the Liliana if they had it last turn, right? But we'll eat a creature, we'll grow the Scooz, our Lily goes down to 1. And Inquisition is a pretty nice draw here. Anything that allows us to get value while emptying our hand is nice. But we see a terrifying hand on the opponent's side, so I guess I'm wrong. I guess they can't have just top-decked all of these Mantis Riders, huh? So, in any case, ironically, as much as Mantis Rider is usually the scariest card in their deck, I think Reflector Mage is what we have to take, because they've got more value than us going on. We need to be all in on a Scooz. So we take a Reflector Mage because we can't afford to get it bounced by the Reflector. And we attack first, hoping that they just forget what Scavenging Ooze does and try to take a trade. But they don't, so we get nice and big. A 6/6 Scooz, we're at 22 life. And at least one of these riders does have to attack Liliana. So as far as stabilizing with our life total, it's been really nice. Scooz is awesome in the humans matchup. We draw Dark Confidant, and that is a pretty fine draw. I'm pretty happy to draw any form of action here. It's one of the more questionable ones, though, because, of course, the life loss liability, the fact that it's not a very relevant body on this board, but, I'll take it. We'll play the Bob out. I could have had many better draws, but that's a fine one. And the opponent will play Meddling Mage, naming Fatal Push, which is a fine name, but we've already seen 2 of our 4 pushes, so statistically that's less likely to hamper us than naming like an Assassin's Trophy might be. But in any case, Bob flips the most bittersweet flip of all time. It's Kalitas Trader of Get. And, that's really nice. That's a really nice card in the matchup. But did you really have to flip it, Bob? Why couldn't we have drawn it in the opposite order? Why couldn't we have flipped the Marsh Flats and then drawn the Kalitas? But nope, it's got to be this way. So we take 5 this turn, which is horrible. But we sequence this way so we can attack with the Ooze, force the Chump Block, make a zombie, and still have an activation in case another creature somehow gets to the graveyard. Of course, that Meddling Mage does not go due to the Kalitas replacement effect, so little tiny mini non-bow here between these two, but that's all good. They're both really good. And the opponent top decks a Reflector Mage. Again, among their best, the only better top deck I think is their 4th Mantis Rider, so lots of Mantis Riders, lots of Reflector Mages to battle through. And the opponent is going to hit us down to 3. So, pretty bad stuff. Dark Confidant, let's hope for a painless flip. It's Assassin's Trophy, which is a good flip, but not painless. If Tireless Tracker had been, another removal spell, we might be in business. But as it is, I think we're kind of just dead. But we trophy away a rider. And we are going to attack with everything, force them to find the correct blocks, and the correct thing to do is just to simply jump, and we're dead. We play out our tracker, they just attack, so we're just bluffing removal again, forcing them to make the attack, and they do, and we're dead. So, pretty interesting game, pretty close game, and game 1 against humans is definitely the tough one. Despite that, despite a mulligan to 6, despite a really unlucky flip with Bob, we almost got there, and they had just a parade of their best cards, of Mantis Rider and Reflector Mage. Sometimes the humans deck can kind of tax us out, or, disrupt us with freebooters and Thalias. That's usually more them taking advantage of what would already have been a clunky progression on our end. It can happen, it's an important element of the deck, but that's really more their anti-combo tech and their anti-control tech, I guess. Against us, they want Reflectors and they want Mantis Riders. They want the beef and they want the onboard tempo plays, and that's certainly what they got here. So it just goes to show how we can stay in matchups really well with our deck, even when things are lining up against us. And that's what happened here. It was a super close game. Feels bad to lose it, but in any case, we did lose it, and let us take a look at the sideboard. Alright, my friends, so against 5-color humans, we've got some pretty solid pieces of sideboard tech to bring in. Damnation, Engineered Explosives, Liliana the Last Hope all have really good X for 1 potential. Even Liliana's Triumph has 2 for 1 potential in this matchup, but any removal is good. Collective Brutality is usually just spot removal, but if we're flooded with extraneous pieces of any kind, we can escalate for the life drain as well. And Deathmark is just a 5th piece of 1 mana kill spells, which is quite relevant in a matchup like this. So those 6 come in pretty clearly like all those 6, pretty clearly don't like anything else on our side. What comes out? So I think Thoughtseize is probably the worst card in our deck. I'm pretty happy to take all 3 of those out. And then here's what I do. So we're going to be on the play for game 2. We're going to cut 1 Liliana and 1 Dark Confidant. They're better on the play in this matchup by far than the draw, both cards. But they're still pretty clunky in multiples in this matchup, so we can shave 1 pretty cleanly, and then we just trim away a Tireless Tracker and call it good. So this is a really good configuration for the play. We're going to try to take it to a game 3, and if there's a game 3 and if we're on the draw, Dark Confidant and Liliana the Veil both get worse. So in the past when I've had a little bit more to do in a matchup like this, like bringing in a Pulse and then maybe another form of, some kind of kill spell or some kind of sweeper, I could go down to 2 and 2 of each and then bring in, bring back a tracker or whatever, bring more cards, whatever it's going to be. In this case, in this particular build, we don't have as much to do in this matchup. So I believe what my preferred configuration for being on the draw would be is just to bring back a tracker. I think Bob becomes a lot more of a liability, so we really don't want to see multiple Bobs on the draw, right? So we go down to 2, we just bring back a tracker, and we still play 3 Lily of the Veil. We just want high densities of removal, even when she's clunky. But that's my configuration for the draw, but for the game you're about to see on the play, we were set up looking just like this. Alright, my friends, on the play here, game 2 against 5-colored humans, and our hand is pretty solid. The big issue is that it lacks double black for Liliana, and just kind of lacks early interaction anyway. Like, even if we had Liliana guaranteed on turn 3, that might be a little slow, and as it is, we don't even have that. So, nevertheless, it is a keep. It's got enough going on, and we have our opponent taking what I believe is the first mulligan of the league, so that's nice. That always helps us out. They go down to 6, and they're happy with that. Seachrome, Coast, and Past. No turn 1 play is good news for us, and another Scooz is an awkward draw. We're just going to play the Bob here. Bob on the play is very nice, admittedly, and we'll see what happens. The opponent's got Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, so we'd be locked out of Liliana this turn even if we had double black. So let's see what the Bob yields. Thalia is very good against Bob. She slows down the flurry of advantage we can get. Like, we can leverage our advantage into double spell turns or just efficient plays while clocking with the Bob. Thalia stops all of that. Bob cannot trade with her. He cannot block her, and she taxes all of what we're up to. So it's pretty good turn 2 play considering what we were up to. And as awkward as this is, like, we don't have any good play besides just to simply trophy away the Thalia, and I wouldn't even call that a good play because it's going to ramp them, kind of unmulliganing them maybe, especially if they were stuck on 2 lands otherwise. And it's really bad if they have a follow-up Thalia, so we're just really hoping they don't have another Thalia in hand. If they don't, I'm pretty fine with it. Of course, Thalia was taxing our Inquisition, so we couldn't even go Inquisition into Scooz, which would be fine otherwise. So, opponent's got Meddling Mage naming Liliana of the Veil. They've also got Meddling Mage naming Fatal Push, so yeah, it's pretty good choices from the opponent. And the heavy presence of Meddling Mage tells me that they don't have Aether Vial in the deck, because when I did my Patreon-exclusive scouting report on humans, every guide I found said against BGX, side out Aether Vial. But if you want to keep in the Aether Vial for whatever reason, you're probably siding out Meddling Mages. So when I see Meddling Mage in heavy numbers, I assume no Vial, and that's how we're operating. So we draw another Inquisition. That could be fine. We're going to lead on 1, and we see Mantis Rider, Thalia's Lieutenant. Well, those are some good cards, but I think it is pretty clearly the play to just fix our own mana, finally. With Field of Ruin, we're on double black. They've probably got their last basic on the field now, so future land destruction effects will be even better. And we get to just strip their hand totally clean. All they have is a Horizon Canopy. And we keep the Bob back because they're the aggro, and it's definitely not worth attacking. They crack the Canopy, then they're going to attack only with the one naming Fatal Push. Now, that's an interesting attack, and maybe a good one, because if they attacked with both, I think I would have blocked the one naming Lily, but I'm pretty happy to make this trade anyway. Like, we're so far ahead on resources, we just don't want to get aggroed out. So we take any clean trade we can get while it's a clean trade before Thalia's Lieutenant buffs them, and before Bob does any more damage to our life total. So we have a Scavenging Ooze here, and I think it's pretty nice to just play Skooz and Goyf. Our Liliana is locked out, so this is kind of the best we can do, and to be fair, it is pretty nice. It's a beefy board. Opponent's got the Mantis Rider off the top, pretty good, and Ancient Ziggurat, so they attack. We can't do anything about that. And I think, due to the Mantis Rider, we have to make our mana remain a little bit awkward by getting a basic forest there and eating. We do have double black, but having a third black source by this stage would be pretty nice, right? But not that big a deal, and we are going to attack because we're going to play a Skooz in the follow-up in the second main, so that's why I did not fire up the Treetop Village here. I think playing a Skooz at this particular stage is better. Since they've got no attacks, we're going to use all of our free green mana except one to get even bigger, gain more life, and just present the widest possible board. Looks like that's too much for the opponent to handle, so they're just going to go ahead and scoop it up. This worked out really nicely for us because despite putting 3 counters on our first Skooz, we still have 2 things to eat with the second Skooz, and we could, in theory, have a 5/5, a 4/4, a 3/4 Tarmogoyf, and a 3/3 Treetop Village next turn, all without finding another removal spell. So they just can't handle our board. We don't have all eggs in one basket, and we're ahead on life. We're still even on resources with a much better board. So in any case, that's kind of how things were, and we got there with a really nice board presence here by the end of Game 2. So might be a little bit tougher on the draw. Let's take a look at Game 3. Okay, final game of this competitive league, my friends, and the opponent will keep 7. Our hand is good. Our hand is definitely good. It's a 2-lander with everything costing 2 or less. That said, it's a little bit awkward. You know, the mana's potentially a tad awkward. Multiple Skooz is a little bit awkward if we are gated by mana, so I don't know, but it's a certain keep. There's no question about that. But being on the draw, I don't know how exactly it's going to pan out. Inquisition of Kozilek is a fine draw, and that makes it pretty clear that we just open up on the Inquisition. There's just no way we don't. And we see a completely stacked hand from the opponent. 2 land, 4 creatures, just all the beef. And Meddling Mage is awkward, but here's my thinking. There's no way they're going to name Engineered Explosives. Like, they're going to name Push in Lily like they did last game. They might name Assassin's Trophy if they Phantasmal Image for a Meddling Mage, and then they might be thinking even beyond that with more effects or with alternative choices. They might be thinking Abrupt Decay, Maelstrom, Pulse, Damnation. I don't think there's any way they named the EE, so I choose to say, alright, we're not caring about the Meddling Mages, they're redundant anyway. Phantasmal Image, I think we rarely want to take this away, just because everything kills it, and kills it more efficiently than it might otherwise do, right? Like, Last Hope taking up, Trophy, both of these things are way better against Image than they would otherwise be against other things. So, even though Mantis Rider is the only card they cannot currently cast, I think we take it. I think that's just the card we are most frightened of. Even with the board as is, Tarmogoyf can wall them off for some time, right? So we take away the evasive attacker and we pass. Opponent will go on the Meddling Mage plan, and I think they're correct to name a creature here. They choose to name Dark Confidant. You know, it's easy for me to say that's wrong because we have been planning to play Goyf this whole time, but, we do immediately draw Bob, so they're rewarded to at least some degree for that, but I believe Goyf would have been the play here even without it being locked out by Meddling Mage at this stage. We're just trying to stabilize the board and keep drawing action and or lands, like most draws in our deck are live, except really high curve stuff, basically. So another Meddling Mage, naming Fatal Push, and champion cannot attack into the Goyf. We draw another Bob, so their Meddling Mage decision is paying off. And at this point, you know, like, playing out the EE on 2 is pretty awkward. All it is a 2 for 2, and then they're left with a big champion of the parish. So I think even though this makes a potential EE on 2 down the road even worse, I think I'm just supposed to play to the board. Holding up Fatal Push is another option too, but because I'm stuck on mana, I have to be mana efficient, so I chose to run out the Skoos. We'll see what happens. They have top-decked another Meddling Mage. I'm sorry. They played out the Phantasmal Image before, so we knew about that mage, and they named Trophy here, so makes sense. We draw Liliana the Veil, so that's, as before mentioned, the higher curve stuff is some of the only bad things we can draw, so our last 3 draw steps have been terrible in context of what's going on. That said, how good is Tarmogoyf? Tarmogoyf just simply walling off the attacks, and even walling off the 4/4 attack, because the opponent's not interested, apparently, in forcing me to double block. So I'm fine with that, and I'm fine just being really patient here. You know, obviously we could be mana efficient and push, and I thought about it, but I think we're just supposed to pass, and we draw Abrupt Decay, so that's a pretty good draw. Pretty good draw. Any castable removal that's not locked out by Mage. And sorry, I'm misspeaking because I'm at the end of my video. Fatal Push is locked out by Meddling Mage, so let's revise that. Let's be clear about that. The opponent has a Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, which is very annoying at this stage, so of course I will respond to her. Abrupt Decay targeting Meddling Mage, the one locking us out of Fatal Push. And once again, the opponent declines to force the double block and will pass back to us. And once again, we fail to hit a land. So keeping a 2-lander on the draw, we've had 6 draw steps to hit a land and haven't managed to do so yet. A bit unlucky, I have to say. But at least our Fatal Push has been unlocked, right? So at least we have something to do this turn. Opponent plays a Noble Hierarch. And opponent is considering finally getting frisky with a champion, but once again they don't. Now, obviously there's a few different things we could do, but I decided, alright, at this point, a lot of our other decent draws are locked out, are made worse by Thalia, or are locked out by the board, so I'm just going to use the push on the end of the turn, and I decided to go for the Thalia. Could have gone for maybe Meddling Mage naming Trophy, that was another viable option, but we went for the Thalia, and we have finally drawn our 3rd land. Sadly, it's a Field of Ruin. However, it does let us just finally play the EE. We're going to take our nice, clean 2-for-1 while we can. That's more than enough considering how far ahead on resources we are. And it also suddenly changes the board to a very favorable state for us. And now we have them on a 4-turn clock with Tarmogoyf. So we could consider continuing to be really conservative, but I think we're going to win this game unless they top deck like all their best cards like they had in Game 1, like Mantis Riders and Reflector Mages. So I think it's like staying back is pretty bad against them having that stuff. And if they don't have that stuff, I think we're going to win. So that's why I chose to get in with the Goyf. And, yeah, they have a Deputy of Detention. To be fair, that's decent. Perhaps not as good as the other things I just mentioned, but definitely nice for them to have something that affects the board here. So will they take Goyf or Skoos? They take Skoos, and they're cracking back for 4. Okay, we draw a Tireless Tracker. Again, a very clunky one, so we were hoping maybe for like a Fatal Push here so we could fix our mana and then kill something, or just more lands, but instead we draw a clunky Tireless Tracker, so we could play either Tracker or Skoos there, but because I'm planning to trade the Tracker away if they offer a trade, or trade a creature away, whatever it is if they offer a trade, I did choose to play the Tracker. I value Skoos more highly here. The opponent's got another Thalia, potentially pretty good for them, and they are sending in the Meddling Mages, so I am going to take the trade. And, tough call whether to get rid of the one naming Bob or the one naming Trophy. Trophy's a way better play than Bob here, but we have 2 Bobs in our hand, so I chose to get rid of that one. That said, we do finally draw a 4th land, so we're playing neither Bob nor, nor did we draw a trophy. Now, Scooz was a decent option there, except for the fact that we would have had to fetch and shock, because remember, we still need double black, right? So I think it's better to just play Liliana, Edict them, see what they do. They're pitching Thalia, and I'm pretty confident that I can erase them. So they don't have a good block there, and now they're facing lethal next turn, and they just scoop it up. So, again, there were ways that could have gone wrong. They could have gotten Mantis Riders and Reflector Mages back-to-back. But in that situation, you see how we were rewarded for aggressively cracking the EE once we finally hit our third land, and then aggressively attacking with a Tarmogoyf. Our 3/3 Scavenging Ooze was just enough to force them to have some kind of action like Deputy of Detention. Otherwise, it would be dissuading attacks. And the Goyf put them on a 4-turn clock, and that's just it. Like, they weren't technically dead on the 4th hit because they could have started jumping, but they're way behind on resources. There's a Liliana on field to deal with, and yeah, they just have seen enough, and they're going to scoop it up. They know we have a Scooz in hand. Or no, they don't. Never mind. But regardless, that was enough for the opponent. So, yeah, fun game, my friends. Fun game. It was, felt like the league had been taking a turn for the worse when we got our really clean run through the league, stopped by Blue-White Control after winning Game 1, and then so we lose the 2 post-side games against Blue-White, and then we lose Game 1 against Humans, and it's like, alright, maybe this is just petering out into a 3-2, which is still okay with me. I never hate cashing the league in a comp league. But we came back, we won both post-sideboard games against Humans, which are more favorable for us, but it's still sometimes hard to take down both back-to-back. And we finished with a 4-1, so a narrow loss 1-2 in round 4 keeps us away from the glory of a 5-0. So the 5-0 continues to elude me in the recent past, but I have played 5 competitive leagues this month with my May list. Some with the Grafdigger's Cage and some with the Pulse instead. But with basically the same list, and we've had 2 3-2s and 3 4-1s, so what is that? I think that is 17-8? Is that correct? Math is hard. 3 3-2s, or excuse me, 2 3-2s, that's 6-4. And then 3 4-1s, which is 12-3. So 18-7. And that is a really nice place to be. I had a bit of a dip in the month of April. I probably finished slightly over 500 in competitive leagues. But now we're back to the good results. So this list feels really good. It feels really tight. I still really miss my second Maelstrom Pulse. I think we would have been bringing it in the vast majority of matches I've played since I've cut it. And it's possible that I should be cutting the second Lily, the Last Hope, from the side to bring back a second Pulse. They're both pet cards, to be honest. I really like Pulse. I really like Lily. So for the moment, I just decided that we're running it like this. But I do stand by the decision to bring back the Cage, and I do like continuing to test Ashiok, even though we still haven't really seen the new tech. No Liliana's Triumph in action, no Ashiok in action, even though they both got sighted in at various stages here. They're just being a little bit camera shy, so we'll have to just play more games. That's the only solution. We're going to have to bring you more games. But in any case, my friends, this was the league. This was our 4-1. It was a fun one. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy the replays as a change of pace from the live stuff. I'm, again, continuing to do mostly live, but we'll mix the replays in as my schedule dictates, and also to please the people who do prefer replays as well. Thank you once again to our brand new confidant, Gay69LOL. Thanks for that, my friend. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate all Patreon supporters. And remember, my friends, if you are enjoying the content, please consider signing up on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You can get access to the Patreon-exclusive scouting reports and other tier rewards as well, especially if you decide to jump in at the higher tiers. And liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing to the YouTube channel. These are all ways to help my content grow. I thank you for watching. I look forward to hearing your feedback. And I'll see you in the comments section. Thanks again. Talk to you soon. Hope you have a great night.